Today, I will tell you about two of the strangest disappearances ever recorded. Cases of vanishing without a trace that I believe lean toward the supernatural. They happened more than 40 years ago, but even now, the police still have not found an answer. Two young men disappeared in an unbelievable way, leaving behind scattered clues and haunting questions. Where did they go? And what really happened? Why did they become such completely different people? And most puzzling of all is the second story. Hello, I am Mr. High. If you love strange, dark, and mysterious stories, please hit subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to comment on even more mysterious cases you know. Who knows, your story might be the subject of the next video. In August 2013, a 19-year-old young man, intelligent, talented, with a beautiful love and a bright future, within just a few short days had turned into a completely different person. He began drinking uncontrollably, playing video games all night with frightening stimulants, then suddenly broke up with his girlfriend, giving away his most precious belongings as if he were preparing to leave everything behind. And then, less than 24 hours later, his parents received a call informing them that their son's car had used roadside assistance. The strange thing is, the night before, he had called them to reassure that he was safe at home. So where did Bryce go, and what was he hiding? Mike and Karen Laspisa were always proud of their only child, Bryce. That summer, he returned to their warm home in Laguna Niguel, California, one of the most livable areas in the United States. The three of them spent the whole summer together before Bryce prepared to return to Sierra College in Rockland to begin his sophomore year in graphic design. Bryce was a gentle boy with artistic talent, many friends, and a lovely girlfriend named Kim. Looking at Bryce's life, everyone believed he was living his best days. But no one expected that just 2 weeks later, everything would take a turn that left everyone in shock. Only a few days after his parents left, Bryce's roommate Sean and his girlfriend Kim began to notice unusual changes. Bryce drank much more hard liquor than usual. He also used a powerful stimulant called Vyvanse, intended to treat ADHD, which Bryce did not have. As a result, he became restless, sleepless, paranoid, and anxious. When confronted by Sean and Kim, Bryce coldly replied, "It's fine. I just want to do what I like." But his unstable eyes and evasive manner made them believe something much more serious was happening. On August 28th, Bryce suddenly took off his diamond earrings, a precious gift from his mother, and handed them to Sean. "I want you to keep these." Before Sean could react, Bryce put his Xbox on the table, determined to give it away too. Sean was utterly bewildered. This was no longer impulsive behavior. It felt like a farewell. Not stopping there, Bryce frantically texted someone and then told Sean, "I just broke up with Kim." This shocked Sean even more, because just a few hours earlier, the couple had still been affectionate as usual. Fearing something bad, Sean immediately called Bryce's mother, Karen. Karen was devastated. She could not believe her obedient son was now entangled with alcohol, drugs, and such strange behavior. Before she could call Bryce, the phone rang. But on the line was not Bryce, it was Kim, her voice trembling as she said, "Your son just came to my house. He is very different. I had to keep his car keys because I was afraid he might do something reckless." Karen asked to speak directly, and when she heard her son's voice, she suddenly felt confused. Bryce spoke very normally, denied everything, only insisting, "I just broke up with Kim. Don't worry. I just want to go home, but Kim is keeping my keys." That should have been reassuring, but Karen felt uneasy. Why were both Sean and Kim sounding the alarm about her son at the same time? Why did Bryce firmly refuse when his mother offered to fly out the next morning? He only spoke vaguely. "I have a lot I want to say, but not yet." The answer only deepened her confusion. Bryce had always been straightforward, never hiding anything from his parents. But now, his voice was vague, hard to read. Finally, because her husband Mike believed their son was fine, Karen reluctantly asked Kim to return the keys. At 11:30 p.m., Bryce left Kim's apartment. Before leaving, he promised he would call to say he was safe. At 1 a.m., Bryce actually called back. "Mom, I'm back in my room." His voice sounded normal, with no sign of distress. Mike and Karen breathed a sigh of relief, believing the turmoil was just a misunderstanding. But only 10 hours later, 11 a.m. on August 29th, Karen received an automated call from the car insurance company. It reported that the family's 2003 Toyota Highlander had used emergency roadside assistance. The strange thing was, Bryce was supposed to still be in his room. He had no car trouble at all. So why did the car appear on the road and need towing? What is happening? Did Bryce really have an accident this morning, or did something else happen last night that he deliberately kept hidden? And then hundreds of calls and messages went unanswered. They even called his roommate, and the answer was, Bryce never came home. He didn't return last night. That was the moment Karen and Mike's hearts felt like they stopped beating. At first, both of them planned to call the police immediately. It felt like a tragedy had just happened. But then, they decided to check their son's bank account, since Bryce used the credit card they had given him. On the statement, a payment appeared, just a few hours earlier, at a small repair shop in Buttonwillow, a deserted town in the middle of the desert, right off Interstate 5, about halfway between his school and their home. In that moment, Mike and Karen realized Bryce had not returned to his apartment at school, as he said. Instead, perhaps he had driven all night, heading home to Laguna Niguel. And indeed, Bryce had previously told his mother, I have something I want to say in person, not over the phone. Could it be that he had been trying to come back to confess something? Karen immediately called the repair shop. The person who answered was Christian, the employee who had just handled the roadside call. She pressed him. Did you see a red-haired young man driving a 2003 Toyota Highlander? With a tattoo on his arm? Christian hesitated, then confirmed. Yes, he called us because he ran out of gas. We brought him gas at a rest stop near the highway. But other than that, Bryce didn't say anything about where he was going next. Hearing the mother's worried voice, Christian suddenly offered, If you'd like, I can drive back to that rest stop to see if he's still there. It will only take 15 minutes. Karen shakily agreed, and the unexpected happened. When Christian arrived in the empty lot under the scorching desert sun, the red Toyota Highlander was still parked there. Bryce was sitting inside, motionless, his eyes staring blankly into the distance. Christian knocked on the window, startling Bryce. When the window rolled down, the young man looked briefly confused to see the rescuer again. Christian said, Your parents are very worried. I just called them. Talk to them. He handed the phone to Bryce. Karen's voice came through immediately, almost shouting, What are you doing? Why are you sitting alone in Buttonwillow like this? Come home. But Bryce only repeated, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here. No reason, no explanation, just a frightening emptiness. Finally, Karen choked back tears and pleaded, Fill up the gas tank, then drive straight home immediately. Bryce agreed. Christian confirmed to her, He just promised he will leave right now. I see the car starting to roll. Don't worry. Then he left the lot, believing the young man would keep his promise. The drive from Buttonwillow to Laguna Niguel was only about 3 hours. Mike and Karen sat at home, counting every minute, waiting for their son to return. By 3 p.m., there was still no Bryce. By 3:30, the car was still nowhere to be seen. Karen called repeatedly, but no one answered. The anxiety grew unbearable. They tried to reassure themselves that maybe their son was stuck in traffic. But deep down, they both knew something was wrong. By 6 p.m., after dozens of failed calls, Karen and her husband abandoned their last shred of hope and officially called the police. The authorities acted immediately. They contacted AT&T and requested a trace on Bryce's cell phone. And when the coordinates appeared, everyone was shocked. Bryce's phone was still in Buttonwillow. It was only a few miles from the rest stop, right along the road where Christian had left a few hours earlier, which meant Bryce had never actually left. And I wonder, was Bryce really clear-headed? And it seemed like Bryce was hiding a terrifying secret weighing heavily on his mind? Because no normal person would act so incomprehensibly, each time stopping the car, sitting still with a vacant stare, as if calculating, thinking about a plan or a scheme, or perhaps something that was making him afraid. As soon as the police in Buttonwillow received the report, they immediately went to the hotel parking lot. And just as reported, right in the middle of the lot, the 2003 Toyota Highlander sat motionless, with Bryce inside on the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. An officer approached and tapped lightly on the window. Bryce turned, rolled it down, and strangely, he behaved completely normally. Polite, clear-headed, showing no signs of intoxication or loss of control. When asked, Bryce even willingly stepped out, took a sobriety test, and passed them all. He even said, "If you want to search the car, go ahead." And the results showed. No alcohol, no drugs, nothing suspicious. The police asked, "Why have you been sitting here for hours? Your parents are very worried." Bryce only repeated, "I'm just sitting. I'll go home soon." The cold, vacant explanation made the officers shudder. They advised, "Call your mother." Immediately, Bryce became flustered, as if he did not want to face his parents at that moment. One officer said firmly, "They are the reason we're here. Call your mother." With no choice, Bryce reluctantly picked up his phone, dialed the number, and handed it to the officer. On the other end, Karen held her breath when she heard the officer's voice. "Don't worry, your son is fine, sober, no substances. But we also don't know why he's here." After that, Bryce took the phone. Karen asked anxiously, "Bryce, why are you still in Buttonwillow? It's been 9 hours. What are you doing there?" But Bryce only said vaguely, "Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll be home soon." Seeing her son unwilling to explain, Karen softened her tone. "Listen to me. Have something to eat, drink some coffee to regain energy, then drive home. We'll talk when you get here." Finally, Bryce quietly replied, "Yes, I'll be home in a few hours." The officer overseeing the call believed everything was fine. They let Bryce go on his way. An hour later, Christian, the mechanic who had helped Bryce, called Karen again. He asked worriedly, "Has he come home yet? I'm still uneasy." Karen answered with some relief. The police already saw him. He must be on the way. But Christian still felt something was wrong. He decided to drive back to the lot. And the scene before him made his skin crawl. Bryce was still there. Same spot, not same posture, staring blankly into space. This time, Christian was firmer. "Bryce, you have to leave now. I'll drive behind to make sure you really go home." Bryce looked briefly surprised, then nodded. They both got in their cars. Bryce pulled out, and Christian followed close behind. For a full hour of driving, Christian called Mike and Karen, updating, "I'm right behind him. Your son is on the highway. Everything's fine." Near the turnoff toward Laguna Niguel, Christian signaled goodbye and turned back. He believed Bryce was finally on his way home. Karen immediately called her son, asking him to describe the scenery along the road to confirm he was heading home. But Bryce refused, only saying, "It's too dark. I can't see anything." Each time Karen pleaded, "Give me a street name, a sign, anything." Bryce avoided answering. By around 2 a.m., Bryce should have already been home, but instead he said over the phone, "I'm too tired. I need to stop and nap." Karen urged, "No, push through a little more, then sleep all you want at home." But then she remembered, Bryce had been awake for almost 24 hours straight. The night, the exhaustion, the empty eyes, and one terrifying question still hung in the air. Was Bryce really planning to drive home, or was he running from something no one knew? You thought that morning your son was simply dozing off in the car from exhaustion. You told yourself, he'll call soon, just as soon as he wakes up. But then, instead of his familiar voice, the doorbell rang, and standing before you was a police officer. And he asked, "Does your family own a red 2003 Toyota Highlander?" In that very moment, your heart sank into an abyss. The night before, when Bryce said he would pull over to rest for a while, Mike and Karen, though worried, still reminded him, "Just sleep a little, then remember to call back so we know you're safe." Bryce calmly replied, "No problem, I'll do that." But the next morning, 8 a.m., there was still no call. Karen reassured herself, "He just overslept, he'll call soon." But before she could think further, the doorbell rang. They rushed out, certain that Bryce had come home. But no, in front of them was a police officer with a serious face. "The 2003 Toyota Highlander, is it your family's car?" Mike choked up. "Yes, it's my son's car." The officer sighed, then said, "The car was found a few hours ago, at the bottom of a 25-foot embankment near Castaic Lake." At that moment, both of them collapsed inside. Police explained, Bryce was not in the car. Only a few small traces of blood, not enough to indicate a fatal injury. The rear window had been smashed from the inside. That meant Bryce had broken it himself to escape. His laptop and phone were still in the car, but his wallet and personal bag were left on the roadside as if they had been rummaged through. Combining tire marks, brake traces, and traffic cameras, police concluded Bryce had deliberately hit the gas and driven off the edge. A suicide attempt that failed. Mike and Karen were devastated. Just 2 weeks earlier, they had hugged and kissed their son as he happily prepared for a new school year. How could Bryce, in only 14 days, turn into someone who wanted to end his own life? Or was there something he was hiding? Could it be connected to the mysterious words, "I have many things I want to say in person to you, Mom"? A massive search was launched around Castaic Lake. Hundreds of people, horses, ATVs, helicopters, divers, all were involved. For days, no trace was found. On the 9th day, search dogs were brought in. They sniffed at the crash site, followed a trail down to the lake, across the dam, over a bridge, and up a small road leading to a truck stop. Then the scent vanished. Another dog was brought in for confirmation. Strangely, it followed the exact same route. This shocked everyone. It meant Bryce had survived the crash, walked to the lake, crossed the dam, headed toward the truck stop, and disappeared. After 3 weeks, the search officially ended. No body, no further trace. Some believed Bryce truly wanted to commit suicide, and his body was still somewhere in the lake. Others believed he had survived, hitched a ride, and vanished off the grid, living in hiding somewhere. Another theory suggested that alcohol and stimulant abuse had triggered psychosis, leading him to drive off the cliff. Perhaps he suffered a head injury, lost his memory, and was wandering somewhere not even knowing who he was. But to his parents, only one belief remained. Our son would never do something to cause his family pain. He must have been the victim of something else. And then, the biggest question still hangs. The thing Bryce insisted could not be said over the phone. What was it? Since August 30th, 2013, no one has seen or heard from Bryce Laspisa. He vanished, as if into thin air. If you have any information about Bryce, please report it to the authorities, because even the smallest clue could solve the mystery that has lingered for more than a decade. Even the search dogs could not find Bryce, but that was not the most mysterious disappearance. The next story has remained a question mark for decades up until now. Do you believe a person can vanish right in the middle of everyday life? One morning in 1984, a 19-year-old young man, obedient, studious, not involved with alcohol or drugs, left home in his familiar car. Just a few hours later, he disappeared as if he had never existed. And then, 10 years later, a man claimed he had seen his body frozen inside a giant block of ice deep in the forest. Our main character is Timothy Moeller, 19 years old, living with his parents in Daytona Beach, Florida. Tim was studying aeronautical mathematics, a bright future, admired by many. On January 24th, 1984, everything began as usual. Tim came downstairs for breakfast, then took his younger brother Frank to school. After that, he drove to the university. But upon arriving, Tim realized he had forgotten his bicycle, something he always brought with him. So Tim drove back home, put the bike in the trunk, and left again. His mother even stepped out onto the porch, watching her son's figure grow smaller down the road. And no one knew that was the last time she ever saw him. That night, Tim did not return. The family called the police. When asked if there was any reason Tim might have run away, his parents firmly insisted, no. He is an excellent student, has many friends, cheerful, doesn't drink or use drugs. He was on the right path. There was nothing wrong at all. The investigation began. Police checked the credit card linked to the family account. They discovered a transaction at a gas station 80 kilometers away. A witness clearly remembered seeing Tim there, alone, appearing normal. After that, no one knew where he went. A few days passed with no trace. But on January 30th, the family received a letter from a parking lot in Atlanta, Georgia, nearly 700 kilometers from Daytona. Tim's car was there. They rushed to the site. The car was undamaged, no scratches, no signs of struggle. But inside were Tim's wallet, identification papers, and credit cards, all intact. Some familiar expensive items, however, were missing. The car's stereo system, a toolbox, and the bicycle. The family stayed in Atlanta for several days, hoping Tim would return for the car. But it was hopeless. Back in Florida, they searched Tim's room thoroughly. Not a single suitcase, not a single set of clothes had been taken. He had left home with only the clothes on his body. Checking his savings account, they discovered Tim had withdrawn all the money, leaving exactly $10. To his parents, it felt like a message: I'll be back. But he never returned. 10 years later, the program Unsolved Mysteries aired Tim's disappearance. And then came a phone call that chilled everyone. The caller was Stephen Cull, living in Wisconsin. He declared, I know where Tim is. Stephen recounted that about 10 years earlier, he had been walking in the forest during winter when he saw something lying in the snow. Approaching, he was stunned to find it was a giant block of ice. And inside, frozen, was the body of a young man. Terrified, Stephen reported it to the police. They removed the body, but since it had decomposed, there were no documents and the identity could not be determined. The body was buried without a name. Yet the image haunted Stephen for life. And when he saw Tim's photo on television, the blood in his veins seemed to stop. The clothing, the build, everything matched. He was certain that was the young man frozen in the ice that I once saw.